Hello, everyone. I'm here with Diane Blaxland, who's joined us to talk about some of her experience, especially within private equity. So this will be of interest to those of you who are interested in the private equity world. But let's get started. Diane, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, I'm Diane Blaxland, and I, in recent years, have worked for a number of private equity houses, helping them with their portcos. Prior to that, I was in managing director roles in global corporations and spent quite a few years in professional services firms. So I've seen the partnership model, the corporate model, and also turning now to something I probably enjoy the most, which is looking at scale-ups and the complicated things that they need to do in order to meet their value creation plans.
Oh, fantastic. And in terms of the private equity world, do you tend to work with the sort of more small cap, mid cap, large cap type PE firms?
I've worked with each of those.
Great.
Probably the sweet spot is where it could be at any scale, but where we're a little bit way into the hold period and something's not quite right. And perhaps it's not clear to the board what's not quite right, but the numbers are soft. And so there's some ambiguity there.
Yeah, so when we speak to some private equity firms and they're talking about individual portcos, sometimes we have the same language as in terms of the numbers are a bit soft, or we're not quite sure, or something's not quite right, and we need to start looking into that a little bit more. So when that happens, then they bring in someone like you.
Yes, yes. And so I come in with the support of the investor, um, uh, and the chair, and the CEO. And then my work is in between the SMT and the board, including the investor. So it's a very delicate space.
Yeah, so a lot of private equity firms, or certainly partners or operating partners that I speak to, there's always an element of hesitance. They don't want to be rough hand. They don't want to come in and sort of take over. But at the same time, if a company's portco is missing its numbers or looks like it's going to miss its numbers, then there needs an element of intervention. So how do you manage that initial relationship, which is the introduction phase or an interview phase?
Mm. So I particularly enjoy the first few days, and I honestly am a beginner in every business. The founders know everything, and I'm the outsider. And so I'm very happy to ask them to teach me how things should be and to talk to me about what's keeping them up at night. And when I ask them one to one to do that, and I work my way through conversations with each of the SMT, each of the board, and perhaps some of the second tier, I tend to find that it's non-challenging, it's non-threatening is what I mean, and it's a positive experience for them, and really helps me to start to get a sense for where the logjam might be.
Yeah, that's interesting, and mirrors our kind of experience as well. I think whenever I speak to, let's say, a chief restructuring officer or a transformation director, or someone that's in there to fix a particular problem within the business, the really experienced individuals who do that always tell me the same thing, and that is that the business holds the secrets, and their job is to come in and try and extract some of that and then add some of their personal experience that's obvious, sometimes is industry agnostic, so best practice from different industries, and then start to apply that. But it's the soft touch, isn't it? It's the gentle touch that I think works quite well. So when you're building the relationship with the portco, then how involved are you in the board meetings? How influential are you when they're communicating with the private equity firm?
So there would normally be a kickoff where I would be attending a board meeting and there would be an agenda item for me for discussion. And then I don't need to be at every board meeting. From there, I have the the introduction by the investor, and I have clearly a permission to be there. And then it's my job to do the exploratory phase, to come back to the investor with an hypothesis. This
Yeah.
seems to be an area worth exploring further. And so I'm, if you're comfortable and if the CEO is comfortable, I'm going to be asking for some data in that area. And I'm going to start looking for trends and causation, and digging a bit deeper. And in general, at that stage, the response from everyone is, so far, has been relief, and
Interesting.
engagement. Yes, relief. Um, and I guess that's a positive sign for me that I'm going in the right direction, and that perhaps people are beginning to feel that it's something that can be articulated. And if it can be articulated, then we've got a much better chance of finding a solution. And so that's my next phase.
Yeah, you raise a good point. It's the communication part of that, and how to articulate that in a way that's both informative, but then I'm guessing that you follow this with an action plan, or with suggestions then into an action plan. Is that the next phase? Is the next phase action?
Yes, yes. So let's say that I've got a hypothesis and I've collected some data, and the data is getting more granular. Um, then now is a good time to bring people together in a room. So before I bring them together in a room, I've already established a relationship one-to-one with each of them. I'm conscious that there may be difficulty in relationships between some people I'm bringing into the room. They may have been struggling with each other for months or years,
Yeah.
and they may have lost the will to go on. So I bring them into a room and give them kind of psychologically a fresh piece of paper.
Yeah.
We've come into the room, we've got this question, we've got this information, we're looking for what's our end goal, and we're certainly referring back to the value creation plan and the investment thesis. Excuse me. But we're now gathered together around a question. The past doesn't matter. Getting to the end goal matters. And we're all responsible together. And I'm looking for good ideas. So then I lead them through what I would call an executive decision-making process or problem-solving process, which is bringing the best ideas to the table. No veto is possible in that room. I won't permit a veto. I will give everyone airtime, and I will give everyone equal respect. I have always found that process creates something new and something valuable to the business.
Yeah.
It gives people permission to use their creativity, and it gives them permission to leave whatever hurtful things or painful things might be in the background, to leave them aside. But it gives them safety.
See, that's interesting because, initially when you think about someone coming in with either the permission of or a mandate from the private equity company, I know some PortCo execs in the past that puts the fear of God into them. They think this is it, it's time for them to go. But it sounds like the way that you approach it is that it could even be a bit cathartic for them in terms of, they can draw a line under what's happened in the past, and we're looking at solutions for the forward. It could even help build a stronger relationship with the private equity firm and with the PortCo exec. That's a really interesting take on it, and probably would, I think if people were watching this or listening to this, would calm the nerves a little bit, that someone like you is around that could come and help facilitate that.
Yes, indeed. Yes. I in some cases, people step away from something they've been struggling with and not succeeding at, and they step away voluntarily.
Yeah.
In other cases, somebody who's been sitting in the background saying, I wish I was allowed to take action, finds that they are welcomed and given permission to take action. So it can, in the best circumstances, unlock the talent in the room and enable them to collaborate much more productively. It's very rarely the case that missing numbers can and should be fixed by sacking someone.
Yeah, makes sense.
very rarely.
Yeah, because you're losing knowledge. No one wants to lose the knowledge within the bit, unless of course that person is disruptive, and that becomes more of a personality issue than a skill issue or an application issue. So with that in mind, from a private equity perspective, at what stage do they bring in someone like you? Is it when the business is missing its numbers? Is it when, we're looking at a refi, or the PortCo is asking for more money? Or what stage do you normally find is the most effective stage to bring you in?
So generally, there's been some doubt about softness, some curiosity at the board saying, we've asked this question 1 or 2 or 3 times now, and we keep being told it's going to be okay, but it's not okay. Our doubts aren't going away. So that means that we're looking at, how much cash is left. We're looking at our exit timing. We're wondering if there is an external cause, because that's been raised at board. Oh, don't worry, it's an external cause.
Yeah.
And we feel increasingly unsure of ourselves. So we're probably a year into the whole period. And the intention of the private equity house was to back the management team. And so that the private equity house has done what it said it would do. And a value creation plan has been, built together and understood well, but we're off target. So basically, it's the degree of comfort that the private equity investor has. How much discomfort do I have, and how long am I willing to tolerate that?
Yeah, I think where we've spoken to portfolio managers before, there's always been and this is more over a beer afterwards, granted, but people always come back to the same thing, which is, I knew there was something wrong in there. I should have trusted my gut to go in there a bit earlier. Or, you can't have all this experience and just not listen to your gut feel. So I always say that if your gut feel is saying that you need to start talking about an intervention, and I don't mean a destructive intervention, but if if your gut's sort of thinking or telling you that, you should listen, and you should bring in the right person who can be someone who can sit in the middle, like you said, between the private equity firm and the PortCo board, and then into the leadership team.
So we can probably move on to the third and final phase now, which is ideally, we've got a management team which has a sense of being united. They've crystallized their action plan to answer the question posed by the hypothesis, whatever it was. They've each felt heard. They've each contributed their best ideas, and now we need to schedule an agenda item on a board meeting for them to come back and lay it on the table for the board, not me, them. And I can be in the room, but I'm making myself less relevant by the minute, because we've focused the whole SMT is now focused around the true causes of the true problem, and we've narrowed our effort down to the very few minimum necessary and sufficient actions that will cure that problem.
Excellent. And I like the fact that the ownership sits with the exec. You're not there to sort of overpower, and you're not there to take any kind of lead. It's up to the board to own this, to present it. When it comes to fixing it, so whatever problem it is, and they come to the fix stage, is it for the board, the PortCo board, and their leadership team and their management team to then execute that, or do you stick around to make sure that is executed, or do you help them execute?
I've done both. So in one case a couple of years ago, a European company, a person put their hand up in the exploratory process and said, I've been dying to fix this, and this is what we should do. And there was then a natural realignment of everyone's interests. And that person was kind of blessed by the board, oh, please, we didn't know. We didn't know that you had the solution. We didn't know that was the problem. But please go ahead. And so I stepped out straight away. In another case, we ended up with action plans that needed to be robustly tested against each other. We had 5 alternatives. And before that was approved by a board, we needed to do what I call trying to knock the solutions over.
Yeah.
So we put the 5 solutions up against each other, and then we set about disproving them. And we ended up with one solution, so that took us a little bit longer. And then I was asked to stay on and to do the, you might even call it program management, to provide the safe space for those stakeholders to keep working with each other. Perhaps one of the reasons that I was asked to do that is that there had been litigation in the background for some years between the parties who were in the room. And happily, we had no lawyers in the room I was in, but the litigation was ongoing. And so it seemed, I think, to everybody a good idea to have an external chair of that working group.
That's, I mean, from my perspective, from an outsider looking in, you know, that is probably the most difficult situation to put yourself in, where the relationship has got to the stage where it's broken. And then you're looking to create a business solution or find a business solution. Despite all of that, the business still needs to go on. I mean, you know, that's very reassuring, and must be reassuring for the board as well of the PortCo.
Yes, well, they were willing to resource that because the alternative was penalty payments forever and bankruptcy.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, there's always a bigger downside, I guess, than not bringing someone in than to bring someone in.
Yes, yes. I'm delighted to say that that operational solution was created by that group of people who had been, you know, lost the will to live with each other, and it's been implemented. Problem solved.
Fantastic. So it sounds like if there's a private equity firm operating partner whereby they're seeing either soft numbers or something's not quite right within the PortCo, that there's someone that's available that can go in and, like you said, go through those 3 key stages to make sure it's non-disruptive, but to get the right solution for the PortCo. Yeah, thank you for explaining that. I think to a lot of people out there on whichever side of the fence they're on, whether they're PortCo leadership or private equity management, I think they'll get benefit from that conversation, I'm sure.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Great. Thank you for your time, Diane. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.